What's up, guys? Welcome back to the ASAP Automotive channel, and today we're going to be serving up some fire chicken on the channel, so stay tuned, son. What's up, guys? So, you guys have probably, I think you recognize this car, but this is actually a good buddy of mine. It's not my wife's Firehawk. This is the reason I found the Firehawk. A good friend of mine, he had it in his family or whatever and stuff. That's how we found the car. You've seen the video where I surprised my wife with hers. But this is actually a 99 Trans AM. It's actually got a bunch of fun stuff done to it. This car is a blast to ride in and drive. And getting it ready to do some stuff to it. So life is all about balance. You need a balanced diet, you need a balanced relationship, wife and girlfriend, you know, that's a little out of balance. So, but anyways, we're working on a balancer on his. So he has got some plans for this car to go to the next level. Right now it's got an LS6 intake, LS6 243 heads, and a nasty little cam in it, and exhaust and stuff like that. But it's planning on getting a little bit of boost to it later on. So right now it's got an underdrive balancer on it. And for any of you guys that know, underdrive is basically where you go to a smaller crank pulley, you're turning all your accessories less. I think this one, if I remember correctly, is a 25% reduction. The theory is less rotation, less spin, the less extra drag on the motor, frees up a little bit of horsepower. It works. To me personally, the trade-off's just not there. A lot of people make it work and it works great. You know, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just personal preference. But the route he's wanting to go now, we're going to get away from that balancer, and we're going to go with an ATI Super Damper, which will handle the full RPM range that he's going to need for this thing, and also handle the extra belt accessory coming down the road. You guys stay tuned. That'll be coming hopefully sooner than later, as we figure out which path he wants to go with his car. But anyways, one of the other things we're doing with this thing is one of the main Achilles heel with these LS motors, and that is the balancer itself, the crank itself. For years, anybody that's done anything with motors or tore any apart or anything like that, or had a balancer off, you've noticed normally some kind of little keyway, a little square keyway. For any of you that have watched the Dale Earnhardt movie, he talks about making the Allen keys, axle keys, with his dad out of screwdrivers. So a little bit of trivia for you guys there, for the true Dale fans. But anyways, these LS motors don't have anything like that. They don't even have any kind of round pin, no square peg, no nothing. They're just a press fit. That works great. There's plenty of LS motors out there. I've seen LS motors with tickling 1,000,000 miles on them. Had no problems other than the balancer coming apart, the rubber coming out, whatever. But when you get into a boosted application, you start hanging a supercharger on there, start pulling these things higher RPM, there is a tendency to where it can start to actually spin on that crank. And if you've ever installed one of these, you'll think, how in the hell does that happen? Well, it's just physics, and I don't write the book, and I don't write the rules, so it is what it is. Eventually, at enough RPM and that load, it'll start slipping on the crank. So we're going to stop that. So he's got the kit here, and you'll see in a little bit. And when you use this like your balancer bolt, it'll go in there. It's a little jig here where you can drill it, and you put these cute little pins in there, and that keeps it from spinning. And that's a little bit of cheap insurance. The last thing you want to do is that balancer to spin on the crank. It starts eating up the crank, you're done. If you're lucky enough to get the crank remachined or whatever, but typically motor's coming out, crank's coming out, you might as well put another crank in it. It's not a fun day. It's just way easier to do this. So, and while you're at it, why not go to the new balancer and go? If you know where you're going, and this is what I preach all the time, is have a plan when you're doing something, when you're doing a car. Know your end goal. Know where you want to go, so you can plan accordingly. So you don't do stuff and be like, oh crap, I got to undo this, or now I got to change all this because of this. Work yourself there, and that's exactly what we're doing here today. So. At this point, I'm going to shut up. We're going to get the car in the air, and we're going to start giving you a visual of what we're going to be working on. So, stay tuned. All right, so before we do get it in the air, we're going to go ahead and disconnect our negative terminal here. Now, typically, you're going to have, if it's stock, you're going to have like an 8mm head on it. You just use a little wrench or ratchet, whatever. Just make sure you don't want to be really touching a bunch of stuff with it. It's not going to hurt so much. But anytime you're working anything, you really typically want to disconnect the battery, and you always disconnect the negative side. Now this one has some aftermarket stuff done to it, so it's got like a 15 or 14, 18, I'm sorry, on it. So, but anyways, it's just a little threaded stud. If it's got the stock style battery, if somebody's changed it to the top post, whatever. End of the day, make sure you disconnect your negative terminal. Next thing you want to do is while you're up here is we're changing the balancer and both belts on this, and I do say both belts. You have your main serpentine and you get a separate one for the AC compressor. We need to get both of those belts off because we're going to be changing the balancer. The main belt's much easier to get to from the top side because it's right here on the passenger side, and it is a 15 if I remember correctly. Yes. So you can use just a regular 15 wrench or a ratchet with a 15 socket. I'm using my gear wrench set. It's a 3680D. Yeah, 80D. Not sponsored by them, but hey, if you guys want to sponsor us, we'll take it. Anyways, it's a handy dandy little kit. It's great for getting into different tight spots, getting more leverage, yada yada. But you can do it with a simple 15. But we're going to go ahead and take this belt loose here. And it's just a typical spring-loaded tensioner. So it'll actually tell you here. So the more this belt wears, the further this is going to come out, and it gives you a cute little guide here to tell you right now this belt's obviously fairly in good shape, and all the way up here we are actually putting new belts on this because he's got the new belt, so I figured why not. What you want to do is put this on here and like that, and then you're going to go this way, and as you can tell it releases the tension on the belt. Now with this kit you can get the extra leverage of having this out like meow, and just do like so, and then what you're going to do is slide your belt off, which this one's a little bit on the snug side. Let's slide her off the water pump there if we can. There we go. Okay, so which we're going to be changing these belts anyways because we're going from a 25% underdrive pulley to a stock size balancer. So that's definitely going to change our belt length because we're changing the circumference of it. So, but anyways, we're going to go ahead and I get this tool off, and we're going to go down below. We'll go ahead and raise it up in the air, and we'll go ahead and take our AC belt off. Alright, so one of the things you do want to check before you go, like obviously we pulled it off of the tensioner pulley up there and I slid it off the water pump here, but take a look at your belt routing and notice how the belt routes. Granted, thanks to the glorious invention of Google, you can just hop on there real quick and look up a belt routing for something like this, or any motor for that matter. But it just helps to have a good visual so you know. Some cars you can actually route the belt wrong and it still will fit on there. Then you have issues with accessories spinning the wrong way, water pump, whatever. It is possible on some vehicles, so just be careful and pay attention while you're doing it. We're going to go ahead and slip this belt off and get this out of the way, and then we've got the AC belt to get off. This is actually a good example here of something to look for and check for while you're working on this, or messing with belts or tensioners. So this tensioner here, when I go to release it off the compressor, well, now it's going to make me a liar. It's going to want to go back. It was actually sticking down here and actually didn't want to go back. We already know this car needs an AC compressor and stuff. We actually figured that out the other day. So it's getting one, but when we do a new compressor, it'll be getting a new tensioner as well. So anyways, we're going to go ahead and slide this down, slide our belt off the upper pulley, and we'll go ahead and work on getting that belt off of there. Alright, so we've I popped these trans lines because his is an automatic. So he's got the trans cooler lines going up here. Popped them out of this bracket to bring it down to where you get access to the bolt, which if yours is a factory one, it's going to be a 24mm. Now, if you don't have access to an impact like this, because these things are torqued down, I think like 200 something foot-pounds, if I remember correctly. I got to look up the spec. What you can do is, like on the automatic cars for sure. You can pop open this little shield right here, and it'll give you access to the flex plate in there, and you can get a like a pry bar or something in there and wedge in there against the teeth to keep the motor from spinning over and get you a big breaker bar on there and break it loose. Definitely going to be a two-person job for that. So in this case, fortunately, we have shop air and an air intake. So remember, use your safety glasses. Don't be an idiot. Alright, so now that we got the main bolt out, what I'm going to do is go through here. This thing it's got 3 separate bolt holes in there to where you can thread in bolts, and you use a 3-bolt puller, much like this one right here. And you got a threaded rod that goes in. You line up those 3, and as you tighten it down, it'll pull the balancer off. Now, a factory LS one takes a little bit different puller, and I'll grab one of those in a little bit and show you. But for right now, we're going to chase those threads to make sure they're getting cleaned out, and I've got to find 3 bolts to fit that one. And it depends on your balancer, what manufacturer uses, or whatever. It just depends on how they threaded it. But you want to make sure those threads are good and clean so you can get the bolts down in enough so as you go to pull it, it doesn't rip them out and then you're screwed. So we're going to get these cleaned out, and then we'll work on getting the puller on there and then go from there. Thanks to the magic of film, and after a quick little trip to the local Ace Hardware, we have bolts and washers now to hook up our 3-bolt puller. So we're going to do, we got those threads cleaned out. We're going to run these down till they get snug, and we've got this center bolt here that goes through there, and there's a tapered bit on the end that's going to rest against the crank. And we're going to go ahead and start turning that down. This one's like a 14 millimeter. Doesn't matter, it's whatever your tool is. We're going to run that down nice and easy and start pulling that, pulling this balancer off so we can work on getting the new one on. Alright, so now that we got the center bolt run down, I've got my ratchet on here. We got my buddy Josh, he's got the cover off down there. We've got the pry bar, or the pry bar caught on the tooth of the flex plate. And because what it's going to do is try to spin on me here as I rotate it. And you'll hear a nice little knocking or popping sound. Just take it nice and easy and just walk it off like a little Sunday walk in the park. Now, once you feel it starting to get real nice and loose and easy, you're going to want to kind of keep an eye on it. You don't want it just falling and dropping off. So, just like that. And go ahead and take your ratchet off, or whatever tool, and just be gentle, because you don't want to beat the crap out of your crank seal. And just try to snake that bad boy on by there without damaging anything. And so this is what a aftermarket underdrive one looks like. I don't have a stock LS1 handy, but they're a little bit bigger, a little bit different. You actually use like a 3-jaw puller on that one to get it off. But what we're going with today is a Mac Daddy full-blown ATI Super Dampener with the extra pulley for the AC and all that fun jazz. And where's the other part? Some assembly required. So we're going to show you in a second how to put all this together. Alright, so anytime you're messing with one of these dampeners, especially these ATI Super Dampeners, near about every application is a little bit different depending on your part number and yada yada. Basically, there's 3 pieces to this one. You've got your hub assembly here. You've got your back pulley here. That's for your little 4-rib for your AC in this application. And you've got your main pulley out here. So in here, when you're putting these hubs on in this particular application, on inside the hub, I've already got it a little bit together. It's kind of a bit of pain to line it up, so when I did that, you've got a little dimple right here, and it tells you offset hole. On the hub is the same little hole on the face there to tell you how to line this thing up and clock it up. So you kind of go ahead and slide it in. It's going to be a little bit tight fit, kind of wiggle it in. You've got these tapered 5/16 bolts here. We've already put a little bit of blue 242 Loctite on it. You go in here, and they're easy to figure out where these go. There's 6 of them in this application, and they go down in these holes here. So what you want to do in this particular setup, I've got all the bolts in here. 3 of them are not going to be reused, the long ones, until later on when certain other things happen with this car that require extra drag on the crank pulley and actually an additional pulley. But for right now, we're going to do the 6. We're going to run those down. You're going to start. I've already started this one. I'm going to go over here. You want to go 180 from each other and just start pulling it down all the way around. And that'll ease it. You don't want to get it all cocked sideways and it start pulling down and start stripping threads and all that, and then you're in quite the battle. So once you get these all run down and snugged, I went ahead and started all these just to make sure everything lines up good, and as it pulls up it'll all line up. Alright, so now that we got our 6 recessed head bolts torqued down to 18 foot-pounds with our 242 Loctite, now we've got 3 other bolts that we need to put on to secure our back pulley to the hub as well. We notice, in this particular part number, in this particular kit for this LS1, you got 2 different bolts here. In this case, we're going to be using the shorter bolts for the back pulley because we're not running a separate front third pulley just yet. If you're going to be running a supercharger or something on this thing or on your vehicle and you're running that third pulley, then you're going to be using the longer bolts. But we're going to save those for later just in case something happens to end up on front of that crank. So for now, I'm going to put a little bit of, already put a little bit of blue Loctite on here. I'm going to touch it up. It's been sitting for a minute. And we're going to put these in and we're going to torque these down to 30 foot-pounds. And these are a 12.38 head. Oh God, it's gonna break now. All right, so to mount the new balancer on, we went ahead and smeared a little bit of grease in there. The seal's really not that old. It was just put on the last time when the underdrive balancer was put on. What we did is used a tool here. It's part of this Blue Point kit, part number YA188MKTB. So there are different kits out there for harmonic balancer installers or whatever. Just happen to have a lot of Snap-on and Blue Point stuff. So it's really all whoever comes around. They only wanted to give me the time of day when I first started. So not a fanboy, just deal with those that deal with me. But anyways, you can find all kind of harmonic balancer installer kits on Amazon, eBay, parts stores. You can rent them or whatever. I just wanted a good complete kit. It's got all the different adapters. One we're looking at, it's got a rougher. What you want to do is you just match it up to the old bolt. This is actually part of the crank pitting kit. Match up your threads. And that way you know you got the right adapter down in there. Thread it on down in until it bottoms out. And then start tightening this nut, which happens to be a 32mm. And just start easing it down and have somebody on the flex plate or flywheel if you're a manual car keep it from spinning and go ahead and just run it on down until it bottoms out. So now we're going to go ahead and work on pinning the crank. All right, so once we ran the balancer down with the installer, that gets it pretty close. But to really seat the balancer to where it's resting position, you actually reuse the old bolt, which is really a one-time use outside of using it again to bring down the balancer. So you're gonna run it back in and you're gonna torque it down to 240 foot-pounds. So that makes sure the balancer is seated. And then now what we're gonna do is go in here and drill to pin the crank like we were talking about earlier. All right, so now that we got our balancer seated, we've worked on drilling for pinning the crank like we talked about earlier to keep it from spinning once other certain loads are put on the engine. Now, it showed you in that kit earlier where it's got the big bolt and then it's got like just a much thicker sleeve than this. So what we did is ran the bolt down just snug. We made sure we wanted to clock our drill bit away from the keyway. You can try to drill in the keyway. We were just talking about this a little bit earlier, but going in there, and unless you've got a special type bit, it's going to try to catch and pull and all that because it's a squared keyway and not round. We just opted just to go about 20 or 30 degrees out away from that and drill in there. A little trick here, we went up top side and pulled the intake tube off of the throttle body. It's 8mm for the clamp. Just pull it off, set it off to the side, unclip your air lid. And we did the 4 bolts out of the top radiator support. We took those out and moved that up off to the side. So what we can do is, even with this handy dandy Milwaukee right angle drill, we still had a little bit of issues when we first started drilling. So we got that loose and we pushed up on the radiator / fan assembly and we're able to get a good straight shot. By the way, Milwaukee, if you guys are watching, if you want to sponsor us, we absolutely love your tools and use the crap out of them. So, but that being said, before you go in there and start just drilling, you don't want to drill too far. Your oil pump sitting right behind that balancer. That's actually what it presses up against, is the oil pump gear that drives. It's basically like your heart. You don't want to put a drill bit in your heart. It's not normal, people, but today's society, I kind of question that. But anyways. So, I got one of these pins here somewhere. There it is. Okay, so what we opted to do was measure, the length of the pin, make sure see how your bit makes a bevel. You don't get that full width until you're down to there. So make sure you want to be at least that deep. Now, of course, this is a bit skewed because this is a lot thinner than the other spacer. We did go a little bit further to allow for is the balancer doesn't sit flush with the end of the crank on the snout. There's you can see in there where the markings is, it's almost a good solid 1/8 of an inch or so, almost 1/4 of an inch there. So went ahead and drilled on a little bit so we can get a little bit deeper penetration with that pin to make sure we get as much contact with this pin, the crank, and the balancer all in one, so we're getting the full effect, especially when this thing's screaming at 6,500, 7,000 RPM with however much pounds boost. So that being said, we went in there, blew everything out really good, make sure it's all clean. We're going to go in there now, pull out that bolt and that sleeve assembly or the guide. And by the way, in the ATI kit, they talk about it. To be honest, this kit was kind of pieced together from free stuff we got from some different places with some other kits and some other parts. But if you get the ATI Super Damper, it says in the instructions, it gives you one of their numbers. And to be honest, you can go online real quick and find crank pinning kit for an LS, and you'll find one within seconds. So, a little bit of homework for you. With that being said, we're going to go ahead and pull that bolt and spacer out. We're going to make sure it's all good and clean. We're going to go ahead and drive that pin in and just tap it on in with a punch. Just tap it on in, just like Chuck said, and make sure it's good and seated. I'm going to look for that pin being flush with the snout of the crank if I can. And like we say, that way you make sure you get the full effect of it. After that, we're going to go in, put a little dab of silicone down in the keyway. You can do that beforehand if you want. It's a little bit easier for you to run a little bit down in the keyway and then slide your balance around, whatever tickles your fancy. At that point, we're good, and we can go ahead and work on putting our new ARP bolt in, because remember, stock balancer bolts are only 1.5 time use. A half time is when you go to reseat the balancer to 240, but then after that, you pull it back out and it's garbage. So we're going to get this tool out, and then we're going to go work and get a new bolt in. in there.
We still got a little ways yet.
All right, so now we've got our hole drilled. We've got our pin in. Just, you know, we've got our silicone in there in the keyway. We just lined our pin up down in there, just took a little punch, just tap it on in, just nice and easy. Now we're going by these specs that ATI wants. They want high temp RTV on, we're using Permatex Right Stuff, high vibration, high temp on both sides of this washer, and some red Loctite on the bolt itself. What we're going to do is go ahead and put it in and go ahead and torque it down to 230 foot-pounds. All right, so like I talked about earlier, we're going away from a underdrive pulley, underdrive crank pulley to back to a normal size crank balancer pulley. So if you're doing normal balancer, normal stock balancer to this, you wouldn't have to worry about this, but it'd be a good time to check your belts and make sure you've got good belts on there, they're not wore out, dry rotted, or cracked, or all the above. Anyways, we got to go back to a stock size belt for now. So we've got the Dayco belt, the 4PK1040 for the little 4-rib AC belt, and then our main serpentine belt's the 6PK2005. You notice most belt numbers, the first number is typically your rib count. 4 there, 4 rib, 6 rib. So, that being said, the belts just go on in the reverse order. So you're going to go ahead, and sometimes they're formed like this. You want to kind of unform a little bit if you can. Go ahead and wrap it over around here. Back. Now we're going to do is go ahead and get a little dandy tool back on here. Pull the balancer or the tensioner down. And make sure he's good and snug. And you want to make sure that you're down in your grooves and your belt's not a tooth off or a groove off. If it is, you go to start it up, you can end up instantly shredding the belt or ruining it, and then you're back to square one. So take a few seconds, make sure you're all good and lined up, and now we can move on to the next belt. All right, so with this next belt on these F bodies like this with the LS1, I like to start at the bottom, go ahead and get some of the stuff routed and kind of tuck the other end of the belt up there, because obviously, like you've seen before, when you're taking your belt off, your tensioner's on the top side, not really going to easily access that thing from down here, but at least you can start and get the rest of your belt routed and then go top side. Cool. Alright, so now we're going to do a cold start on it real quick. Just check the belts, make sure everything's good, and really just to hear the damn thing, it just sounds so good. trying to do a little bit something new here, get a new vehicle in, and you guys will be seeing a lot more of this car as we've got a ton of stuff planned for it and all kind of goodies to upgrade and stuff. So you're actually going to see some of these parts coming from this car going to my wife's car. So the cool, kind of build series and stuff. Now the only thing left to do is we ran it, made sure everything was good, the belts are all good, no leaks and all that. Last thing to do is do a nice little road test, of course, in a nice closed course down in the street in Mexico somewhere. We have freaking tracks to do it somewhere, buttholes with quick freaking closing them. So, I'm going to get my soapbox a little bit. Get out and support your local drag strips. Get out and go to a drag strip. Just show up. Buy some stuff at concession stands. Get involved. Get the kids out there. The sport's only a generation away. We're fighting it from every angle. The EPA is hard on our ass right now with everything, and tracks are closing left and right. We already know Atlanta's closing. Just found out the other day Houston's closing. Guys, wake up. This sport is dying. We need to get the next generation involved. So, anyways, do it safe, get out to a track, don't do it on the streets, obviously. But until next time, remember guys, stock is not an option. What's up guys, thanks for watching again. You guys like the video and you think you want to be a part of this team? We're growing like crazy. We're hiring now. We are looking for a full-blown ASE certified technician, maybe somebody at least on the master level, and everything, that can do diagnostics, AC, all that kind of stuff. So if you're interested and think you'd be a good fit in this team, we've got all the information below to contact us. And remember, until next time, stock is not an option.